It's just like talking at a show.
Exactly. Except I can hear you.
Yeah, there's that.
So I'd like to, again, pretend I'm a talk show host. Normally I like to have the physical thing that somebody's promoting that I can hold up and pretend I'm Conan, but I have it on my Kindle. Oh, there you go. Even better.
Oh, I just got my box yesterday.
I'm waiting on mine to come in, so I cheated and have the Kindle edition, which, congratulations on the book, man. It's really good.
Thank you.
I think Christina sent it to me maybe a week ago, and I'm on my second and a half read of it at this point.
I think I read it, as the roughs and the remixes came through. I think I read it 3 times, and then I said, whatever you do to it from this point forward is I'm fine with, because there's nothing super egregious.
Yeah.
And now I picked up the book. I think last night I went through half of it, and I'm like, yeah, this is what it was.
It's a really good read. I read a lot of music memoirs anyway, just because I'm a dork like that. But this is a really good one, not just because I know Bad Religion, but it reads really well. And I think you don't even have to be a fan of the band to sort of get the book.
You have Jim Ruland to thank for that, because he wrote the book.
How long did it actually take? How long ago did this project really start? Like, when did the book idea really come up?
A year, for sure, a year. And Jim, once we were sort of dedicated to the concept, we just basically gave Jim Ruland an all access pass and said, you can come to anybody's house. You can travel with anybody on the bus. Anywhere we are, please come and ask questions. Here's the phone numbers of all the ex-members. Here's some of our friends that were around way back when in 1980. And he did his job. He really spent all of that time. Not only was he, collating these insane stories, but he had to filter through which stories he felt were important for the book, and then pursue that to whatever fruition it could get to.
Yeah.
He did a great job. He really did. And it was funny. The first pass was, it was very, obviously it's not an autobiography, but there was more just us talking and not his take on it. And we sat with him and said, look, we want your impression of this. We want to, we'll tell you all these stories, and then you tell us what you think of it.
Yeah.
You can tell us you think we're crazy, and that's totally fine.
Where did the actual idea come from? Did it come from in-house, or did he approach you about, hey, I wrote the Keith Morris book and it came out cool, can I write your book too?
No. I mean, it's something that we've always talked about, that it would be nice to have some sort of documentation of us, of our history. We sort of, way back when we were still on Atlantic, we had a manager, Elliot Roberts, who was Neil Young's manager.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Super sweet guy. And he just said, look, document everything, film everything, but we're lazy. and we don't document everything. And, NoFX put out their book, and their book just reads like this just great horror story of this is amazing.
Right.
But and people say, you should do a backstage passport. And I don't always say, that's not us. It's their backstage passport is full of exciting exploits. And our backstage passport is Brian reading his Kindle and me drinking a Dr. Pepper. It's
right.
Boring.
It would be funny from a sort of in a tongue-in-cheek manner to do a half-hour documentary of This Is Us backstage, just hanging out.
I mean, I think that for me, my idea of a rock documentary is still Song Remains the Same, because that's the first one I ever saw.
Right.
And I just kind of said, I guess this is what a rock documentary is. So I would always think you're supposed to create a play and then you show your live show, and that's basically the extent of it. I think it was the Eagles documentary that got everybody talking about these guys are bearing it all.
Yeah.
And zero fucks about feelings.
Right.
And so that may have been the fuse. And even Rick Marino was saying, this is what you should be doing. You need to do this. You need to write this book. You need to just start looking for ways to just document your history, because it's a good story to tell.
Why do you think you weren't documenting your history before at least before the Atlantic years, but just didn't come up, or?
Probably because in our own weird way, we just don't think we're historically important. All right, here we are.
Wow.
But people say I don't know where we are in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
And if you ask me what I think we are, I just say we're four guys from the valley practicing in Graffin's mom's garage.
Right.
Even though all of these things are happening, that still hasn't changed in my mind. I don't know why, but that's just, it's like, oh, whatever. We'll get around to something.
Have there been points in the career where things happened and you were like, my God, this is really cool, or it has become more than 4 or 5 or 6 guys playing in California together, but like where you kind of allow yourself to stand on stage and maybe let nostalgia creep in and say, oh, this is really cool?
Sort of. That first Suffer tour in Europe was like that because it was, we had, for everything that we had done since 1980 until the end of 88, that tour in Europe was the first time where it, for some whatever reason, it felt validating, even though people have friends there, but it just seemed like they like us. And that was sort of the beginning of us saying we do have something to offer. Not that we didn't ever think that we did, but we just didn't think anyone cared. Like there's the inside part of you believe what you do.
Yeah.
And then there's always sort of, you don't necessarily need it, but it is nice to have someone pat you on the head and go, well done.
Right.
Every now and then.
Yeah. But that sort of comes across in the book too. That first, there's like a story of a little bit of a disastrous, maybe East Coast run. And it sounds like the first one, maybe in 86.
Yeah.
But then a couple of years later, it's like, oh, we're in Europe and there's a shitload of people here and a shitload of people waiting to get into this place that can't actually fit in this place. Why do you think that happens in Europe? Because I feel like that's a recurring theme when you talk to people, especially Germany. People that were mutually friends with Dave Hawes, for example, does great in Germany and can't quite figure out why.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's something that just strikes a chord. And if you think like, well, it's Dave and it's Bad Religion, just using those two as examples, they're not, even though we've toured together a lot, they're not really the same.
Right.
You can't say they're musically alike.
Right.
Maybe we're closer lyrically alike. And so I've had a thought that, if English is not your first language, especially for a band like Bad Religion, you have to work pretty hard to decipher what we're trying to say.
If English is your first language, you have to work pretty hard.
Oh.
I'm speaking only for myself.
But I think that putting in that effort and maybe having a sound of, for us, that maybe just didn't exist anywhere else. There just was no other band like us in 1988. That's for sure. There just wasn't anything doing what we were doing. We knew that we were doing something that no one was doing,
mm-hmm.
and that just was happening. So, it will always be a matter of right place, right time, and you can't ever tell what part of the globe is going to be the right place for you at the right time unless you go. I mean, we didn't want to go to Germany. We really didn't want. We're like, no, we're not coming. And then eventually we just caved and said, fine. And
was that because you didn't think anybody would care there, or because it seemed like
we just got off a U.S. Suffer tour, and if that failed, why would we go halfway around the world to fail in Europe where we don't speak the language or know what we're doing?
Right.
It was already miserable in the country that we're supposed to know. It just sort of it blossomed into a purpose, and it drove us in ways that made us want to do this more.
Did that tour change things when you came back from it? Because it really, from that point on, it was like an album every year, or at most maybe 18 months through the end of the 90s, really. So it seemed like there's a little more focus after that. I
think knowing how Greg and Brett write, and I mean, especially this Suffer No Control Against the Grain era, they were just massively prolific. I mean, this, like, we would rehearse at this place in the valley, Uncle's, and every time we got together, there was a new song. And you know, I used to say, and I'll say again, like, we're the recipients of this healthy competition between Brett and Greg.
Yeah.
Brett would say, I wrote this new song, and Greg would say, oh yeah, check out my new song. And Brett would go, oh, check out this. And
Right.
so they're bouncing back and forth, and we're just going, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great. And you know, 16 rehearsals later, you've got an album.
Do they allow for much in the way of you guys changing their ideas around, or did they come in really with full songs written and then you guys kind of fit in?
In the earlier incarnation, there was a lot of, you know, I mean, most songs just came in either on kind of a crappy keyboard or just a guitar. It was just, here's the song, here's the chords, here's the words, and then we would just go. And so, you know, the direction that Pete got was just play as fast as you can, and we would just make it up, trying not to play the wrong note. As time progressed, I think probably by around the time we hit Generator, you know, suddenly there was click tracks, and we had ideas of tempos, and we wanted to pull things into places where it wasn't just every song is going to just almost fall off the rails, but we did it. Now, you know, we're going to pull it back and play these songs at different tempos. So that sort of began that idea of more of the songwriting texture. And Greg, when we, I think it was after Against the Grain, Greg had moved to New York to go to Cornell. And so he was alone out there in his studio. So he would come out with complete songs. Here's everything. It wasn't just a demo with a guitar or a keyboard. It was a song with bass parts and lead guitar parts and drums. And, you know, it was always allowed for us to play better than him, because he can program a drum machine, but Bob can play drums.
Right.
So there was that. And then there was always songs where it was kind of like, you just do what you do. That was kind of do what you do. Okay.
Yeah. Do you get more direction of do what you do from one versus the other, from Brett versus Greg, or do you kind of approach from your own perspective?
Greg has a very good idea of what he wants you to do. And Brett is the kind of shopper when you know, Brett would go to the store and go, can I help you find anything? I'll know it when I see it. And so with Brett, you're just kind of playing all of these different things until he goes, that's the one. And then you start focusing that down.
Is that still the way it is?
Brett's a little more complete in his songs now. I think by the time we hit the studio, they both know what they want to hear. They're always open to interpretation. They're always like, if there's bass wise, if there's a part in a song, like, what do you think about this? And I play something, they may say, I like that, I don't like that. But they're straightforward with it, and it's never any hard feelings, because really early on when we were in the studio, we were always okay with saying that was almost good. You know, I see what you're trying to do. Those are the things that we used to say to each other. I see what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like, you do it again without any hurt. You wouldn't be hurt by that. It was like, you all wanted the best thing. And so criticism from your partners wasn't in a way to tear you down. It was in a way to like, let's do this. Let's make this right.
I'm sure it takes one or two times of hearing that before you, like, the ego is still there a little bit.
No, because we sort of grew up in the garage together, and we'd been together long enough that we sort of understood where we were all coming from. Usually it's a strange thing with the band, you know, personal criticisms were almost outside the realm of the music. For some reason, the music was part that we all really respected. This is what we do. But I might criticize your shirt.
Yeah, right.
Or your shoes. You know, I might say, like, you're really wearing those?
Right.
That's, you know, nothing. Usually with the music, it was, the criticism was always perceived as constructive.
When it came time to pull stories for the book together, did you find yourself pulling punches at all? Like, were there stories that you guys kind of agreed upon that you didn't want to have come up or surface, or was it really kind of fair game?
There weren't stories in the sense of telling stories about things, but one of the things that we all agreed on is that we weren't just going to talk trash about everybody and everything, or even other bands, because that's just sort of been done.
Yeah.
And it certainly doesn't benefit anyone in our camp to talk poorly of anyone, and we really wouldn't do it anyway. So that being said, the agreement, if it was between quote unquote active partners, would have just been me, Greg, and Brian.
Yeah.
And so whatever Brooks was going to say, Brooks was going to say, and we weren't going to edit him.
Yeah.
Whatever Pete was going to say, Pete was going to say. So that was sort of that. We just said we as the active current members aren't going to talk about that.
It seems like everybody, and maybe this is the way that Jim Ruland kind of threads the narrative, but it seems like everybody has similar views of a lot of the different things that happened throughout, whether it's stuff that happened in the early days, whether it's the writing process, whether it's moving to Atlantic. It seems like even though there's 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 different opinions, you guys still seem like you're on the same page about a lot of the band's history, which is cool. And I think it wasn't really expected.
I almost want to chalk that up to being able to look back at that now, because had you asked, where does the band stand in 1994 on all of this, you would have probably gotten 3 very different takes on how we got where we got.
Right.
We didn't really touch on what it took for us to leave Epitaph and go to Atlantic. There's parts of the book that talk about all of that, but there were a lot of conflicts, and we didn't have fights because we all wanted what was best for all of us.
Right.
But strangely, I was the one in the beginning at Epitaph. I was making phone calls to everybody, asking them, like, why should we do this? I mean, nobody ever said, let's just go do this. We really had, like, why should we do this? We're good where we are. So what are we looking for?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody had a different answer.
What sort of people would you ask in situations like that? Like other people who had done it, or?
Oh no, only band members, only members of Bad Religion. I didn't care what anybody else thought. I wasn't gonna, like, the one thing that we have learned in Bad Religion, our experience as a band is nothing like anybody else's experience, because every band is different. And so if you were to ask a band that was already on a major label, but they had their leader was a singer-songwriter, and everyone else in the band just kind of went along with him, that wouldn't be politically what we were like. We were this democratic entity where everyone's vote was exactly the same. So we had our own machine that we were trying to focus on.
Well, and because if you left your label, you were leaving the label that started because of the band, really.
At the time, because I was working there, Brett was working there, there was a few other employees working there, and it just felt like Bad Religion was growing exponentially. Epitaph as a label was growing exponentially. And the other bands that were on the label seemed to be struggling in the shade of Bad Religion.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't, all the distributors would say, well, we'll take 150 Bad Religions and we'll take 2 Pennywise. We're like, no. Even Mike was upset about some things, and we're like, Mike, I can't, I'm telling these people, please take 50 NoFXs.
Right.
And it's just, they want the Bad Religion record, and it's like, I can't make them not take it. And even Brett and I were talking about that. There was a concept of, like, would the other bands on Epitaph be better if Bad Religion weren't here?
That's bizarre to look at in hindsight, because I know as a consumer of punk rock music in the early and mid 90s, like, what we wanted was, like, you knew that if a band was on Epitaph, you were probably going to like them. You knew if a band was on Fat Records, you were probably going to like them because you knew the pedigree, or Lookout Records, or you knew what the sound of that label was. And so you could go to, I'm in the Boston area, so you could go to Newbury Comics and you could flip through and say, well, this came in, it's from Millencolin or whatever. And I don't know Millencolin, but they're on such and such a label, so I will probably like them. So as a consumer, now granted I was 15 or whatever, but that's kind of what we looked for, is that, well, they're on Epitaph, so I probably like them.
Yeah, but that, all of us know the story of whether it's twin tone or sub pop. Like you have your moment, and then you sort of just, you don't fade away, but you have your bubble, and then it just, that bubble moves to some other indie. And maybe the thought was, is Bad Religion Epitaph's bubble, and if so, can we move that bubble away to allow the other bands to prosper? It was that, like, can someone else do the workload? Because if it's just Brett and I and a couple of other guys with a forklift on Santa Monica Boulevard doing the things that we were doing, imagine what people with an actual truck could do.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. Yeah, I had never really looked at it that way. I've never been one who really cared about bands selling out, because I feel like that stuff was for earlier bands. The thing about moving to,
I get it at a certain time in a band's career, but we were already selling 200,000 records of Recipe for Hate. Like this was us doing this, and we're like, this is insane. We can't do this. But we did it.
Yeah.
It was just we'd already kind of crossed that threshold of, we were now looking at the things that we couldn't do. And what we couldn't do was, we couldn't get Bad Religion into Walmart. We couldn't get Bad Religion into record stores in mid-America.
Yeah.
We couldn't get Bad Religion songs on the radio. These were out of our control. Obviously, as it states in the book, Brett proved all of that wrong with The Offspring, that it could happen. It was possible.
Right.
But I'm a firm believer in that sort of butterfly effect of, everything happens for a reason. And I wonder if we hadn't gone from Epitaph to Atlantic after Recipe for Hate, would we have actually written Stranger Than Fiction? We may have written an entirely different album.
Yeah, right.
So, you look back and you look at everything and you go, it happened for a reason. I'm glad it happened, because I'm glad I'm here now, where we are now.
In looking back, and before I hit record, obviously we were talking about Suffer as being the album that everybody swears that they were there for, except that nobody was actually there for. It's like Ted Williams's last game when he hit a home run and never played again. There's like 1.4 million people that were at that game, except they said like 17,000 people were actually there.
Right.
But what, in your looking back over 40 or 41 years, is the album that kind of everybody was there for it? Like, this is the one that blew us up into becoming Bad Religion. Was it Suffer in hindsight? It just took a while, or was it Recipe for Hate? Or
I think that, Suffer made us become the band that we became, but I don't think it was necessarily external. It allowed us to make a sound that we all liked. And when you're in a band and your philosophy is, we want to make the record that we want to hear.
Yeah.
That was really it. We want to hear what we want to hear, and we're going to record it because we don't hear it outside.
Yeah.
What we were doing was a blend of everything that we knew from 1980 and all the bands, whether they were the Adolescents or the Ramones or the Germs. We were taking all of that in and putting it into a song structure that was basically Cowgirls in the Sand on speed, and saying, all right, this is what we are.
Yeah.
And all of this, Greg has a lyrical ability to be both melodic and percussive, and so he can deliver these lyrics at a speed, but you can still understand the words he's saying we knew we had something, and we started doing the background vocals and said, yeah,
Yeah.
this is us. So that record made us. I think Recipe for Hate was the record that sort of put us on the map as a band that wasn't just a band from 1980.
Yeah.
I think up until that point we were like, even though Suffer and No Control, people like them, and no Maximum Rock and Roll and Flipside had Suffer as the album of the year, but I think we were still known as the band that made How Could Hell Be Any Worse in 1982.
Wow.
And I think Recipe for Hate was sort of the Suffer, No Control, Against the Grain triad sort of was the building point of saying, here's Generator, because now we wanted to make a record that was different than those three. People realizing that these guys can do kind of anything.
Yeah.
Because now we had a new drummer, and we just took a different take on things, and all of that culminated in the album Recipe for Hate, which people to this day go like, that was the album that really got me hooked.
That's probably the one that got me hooked. Like, Generator was the first one I bought, and I remember actually hearing the song Generator, and I don't remember where. It was probably on 120 Minutes or something like that, because living in New Hampshire, you didn't really have much of a place to find punk rock music. Right. But like the first lines of Generator, the first time I heard them, I remember going, ooh, like, I like this band a lot. But then, like, Eddie Vedder was on Recipe for Hate, and I was a huge Pearl Jam fan. And so that kind of, to me, as a 13, 14-year-old kid, like, validated that this is a really good band. Like,
that may have been that. I mean, that, I don't think that was the intention of that, but no. In retrospect, that may have given us a little bit of credibility in a world that we didn't belong in before.
It might be a small generation of kids in hindsight, but there was a generation of kids that looked at bands like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and the stuff that they liked, like they were the litmus test as to whether something was good or not. So sure. If Kurt liked the Pixies and Eddie liked Bad Religion, well, then those must be like, right. If they vouch for him, then
like anything else, I've always said that, opportunity will knock and you will enter the room, and the key is to have the talent to stay in that room.
Right.
And, that's sort of where you climb that ladder of moving into different arenas. And eventually you get to a place where that's just where you kind of stay. And so in all of those moments, we were, knocking on a door and entering into another room. And we always told ourselves, we need to make sure that we're aware of our surroundings and not taking this for granted. Mm-hmm. Because we always laughed about the fact that when you think by 1994 was the year that everything sort of opened up for everybody,
right?
We're a 14-year-old band,
right?
So we'd already kind of been there, done that, and everything was cool. It was old hat to us. We weren't excited or nervous or care. It was just like, we're here. We've been here. So it was sort of an easy ride for us, easier than most, because they had no idea what to expect.
But then a lot of bands obviously fell by the wayside. They kind of fizzled out, some rather dramatically, some not. And what has been probably most impressive about Bad Religion is that you haven't really gone away. There have been lulls in recording albums, but you haven't gone away. You've still very much been an active band and not a nostalgia band. And I think that is important for people to, I mean, I think people know that, but I think it's important to people too, that you've stayed a relevant band.
We had our I forget when you get a speeding ticket and you go to driving school.
Yeah.
We had our moment where we got in trouble and we had a train wreck and and we had to go to driving school and go, okay, yeah, we're not supposed to do that. Red asphalt. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So that period between Into the Unknown and Suffer was putting back together the pieces of what we knew we had when we were making How Could Hell Be Any Worse. Let's sort of let go. And that lesson was 40 years later, that lesson has not been lost on us. We're still like, look, we can do this as long as we're not in a like naively arrogant, which is just, it's a dangerous way to behave.
Right.
You don't know any better, but you're a total dick, and you're like, where does this come from?
Right. But you're also young at the time. A thing that I think gets lost on people, it certainly gets lost on me a lot, is that the band started when you all were in high school. So that those early years, you're still what, 20, 22 years old, where you're going through that, have to go to traffic school.
Yeah.
Time.
We let's see, we made the first EP when Greg and I were 16, and How Could Hell was 17.
That is insane in retrospect.
And so Into the Unknown started, I was 19.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, no, not for me.
Yeah. Well, not for a lot of people, as it turns out.
That's okay. It's good now. It's good now.
It's that I think to understand that is that you were 19 years old at the time is kind of a thing that only really resonated with me when I read the book and understood kind of the relative ages of everybody, is I can't imagine having those sort of moments as a 19, 20-year-old kid. Like you put music aside there for a while, but you were still in your early 20s when you came back to it.
Yeah, I came back in 86, so I was 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 22 because just out of my 21, because I turned 21 at a bar that I'd been drinking at for 3 years, so I never forget that. Yeah, but that, I think that there's two ways of looking at this band in particular. When we were younger, we were older than our years in our philosophies and in our desires. And as the band sort of aged into what it was becoming, we were sort of entering this Peter Pan phase where now we're just staying too young.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now we're not maturing emotionally. Now we're reverting to no brown M&Ms and this towel is too crinkly and shit like that, because that's what this does to you. So like with you say about bands, like they last 5 years. Well, we've had this ups and downs over 40 years, and we've learned, oh, this is one of those down times. This is when everybody's, not doing well because of whatever. Yeah. So look at where we are right now. In 40 years, nothing like this has ever happened. And we obviously have been touring every year since 1988. So all of this time down is really putting everybody in a different mind space. We're talking to each other a lot. We're talking about like Zoom meetings with all the guys that ride the bus because we all miss each other's face.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask about is what you've done to sort of stay connected during this time.
Honestly, for me and probably for everybody else, disconnecting was kind of what I needed.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of the year, we had a tour lined up with the trio, and we had our year lined up, and you could just sort of watch it fizzle off in the future. And the more that domino kept falling, more things kept saying this is not going to happen. I'm not going to say I became despondent, but I was definitely the negative Nelly saying, we're not going to play a show in 2020. We might not play a show in 2021.
Right.
And they was like, you can't say that. And I go, I'm feeling it. And this was back in March.
Right.
So maybe for me, I just sort of, I kind of just started living a different life. And it wasn't really until everybody said, oh, you still have a book coming out. And like, oh yeah. Now it's like, oh, we have a book. Yeah. And that was cool. But, maybe there's a bit of introspection on everybody's part about what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. 41 years down the road.
Got to grow up sometime.
Right.
I told my dad, I said, hey, Dad, it's still just a phase. I'm almost done.
There's a story, and we're kind of over half an hour, so I want to be mindful of.
Oh, don't worry about it. I've got nothing better to do.
No. There's a story in the book that I have actually, the first time I talked to Brian Baker, I told him this story too, but there's a story about you in the book that is a perfect sort of parallel to it, is that when you're a kid and you're learning to play guitar and whatever, you watch other people play guitar and try to figure out what they're playing. And so there's something about you watching Randy Rhoads and then being like, I'm never going to be that good. Like maybe I got to pump the brakes on that. But I remember listening to the Gray Race the first time, and with this old Silvertone guitar that like my uncle had from Sears or something like that, trying to play. And then I got to 10 in 2010 and the solo on that song. And I remember putting the guitar down and turning it off. I'm like, fuck, I'm not going to be a guitar player.
Right.
So it's funny. I've told him that story, and I told somebody else that story too. As wow, it's almost like it's in the book.
That's the thing, is there are these guys that just are, they're magic.
Yeah.
And you know, whether it's drummers or guitar players or even songwriters, maybe one of the things that we've had historically was the ability to find the person's magic and just fucking squeeze it out of them.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing happening. Like, okay, excellent.
Right. But that has sort of, as much as anything, been one of the things that I think has helped keep the band a current band over the years. Whether it was the way that Brooks played, kind of changing the band's sound and feel, or whether it was the way that Brian Baker plays and kind of melting people's faces, like mine anyway. But I think that that's one of the things that has sort of kept the band moving forward over the years.
Well, it would be, you know, one would be remiss not to find an individual's strength and exploit it, especially in a band. And if you take Brian as an example, had we brought in someone who was our friend, who just had a guitar, we wouldn't have moved up the ladder of the talent in the band. It wouldn't have been this like opportunity to really expand what was possible.
Right.
And I think that that's something that from the beginning of this band, we knew our limitations as musicians, because we just were all like, okay, we're just ham-fisting it, we're just making it up, but we know what we want, we're just not good enough to do it.
Right.
And so anytime we got the ability to find someone who could do that, we would take it. But we would just say, this is the guy that's going to move us into the next, into our future.
Yeah.
And you know, it's bringing all that to sort of a conclusion. Jamie, as our drummer, when he came, like Brooks was fortunate that he came into the band right when we were making the Process of Belief.
Right.
So he got to sort of introduce himself to our fan base with new material. Jamie came into the band with just a catalog.
Yeah, right.
And when Jamie first came to Jamie tried out and was right away the guy. But when we got together to sort of like, okay, we're going to make a set list and we're going to play this. And Jamie sat down and played this. We didn't play a show, we were in rehearsal, but Jamie played this rehearsal show like Brooks would have played it. And we stopped and we said, well, Brooks had his interpretation of how to play Bob and Pete and even Jay's.
Yeah, right.
And what we're hearing from you, Jamie, is you're playing Brooks's interpretation of Bob. And so what we want is your interpretation of Brooks, Pete, Bob. And so he was stoked. He goes, really? And I said, go back and listen to the records, because I think you were trying to learn everything from live shows, thinking that that's the way we are, which is true. But we knew that we wanted to sort of go backtrack and go back to how the songs were recorded. And when we started playing them live like that, people were saying like, it's too slow. And I'd go listen to the record. It's not too slow. It's exactly the way it's supposed to be.
Right, but it's been 1,000 miles an hour for 15
Jamie kind of took a little bit of shit for that. And I'm like, no, he's doing the exact right thing. And every night we're like, you're doing the right thing, because these songs are worthy of us playing them correctly. And so given enough time, Jamie started putting in his interpretation of these songs in a way that now Jamie has his own flavor, and then we get to record Age of Unreason, and Jamie gets to present, now here's what I do.
Are there songs that you play differently now with Jamie than you did, like that have gone through maybe 3 generations of how you play them, whether it was Bobby and then Brooks and then
every song.
Okay.
Every song. Because it's sort of, I'm trying to think of an analogy that would make this right. I guess it's like if you have a written recipe and you're baking this cake, and eventually you go, I know how to do this, and you put the recipe away, and then one day you put in too much of one ingredient, but from then on you just keep doing it that way. You start making a different recipe.
Sure.
You have to go back to what you were doing when you started it. When you first wrote it, there was a reason why it's the way that it is. Like you liked it that way.
Right.
And so, when Brooks was in the band, everything was his interpretation of that recipe. And so we just told Jamie, go read the recipes, go listen to those tapes.
Right.
And, even he would say in the drum magazine, he'd go like, I listened to the way, Peter Bob would play. And it's like, I wouldn't play that way, but I understand why they did. And so he does his interpretation of what they were doing in a way that makes him comfortable.
Does that change the writing and recording process eventually? Like once his actual personality comes out, which you had through years of touring with him, but does that sort of change the writing and recording process about the things that you can pull off now?
It just raises that question. When you have someone, following someone like Brooks, when you realize Brooks can do anything on drums.
Yeah.
And when I say anything, I mean literally anything.
Yeah.
Do this, and he would do it. You could come up with the most absurd pattern, and he would go, oh yeah, you mean this? And he'd play it, and you go, oh. So with Jamie, maybe in the beginning it was, can you do this? And Jamie was sure. And Jamie always, sure. Yeah. And he would do it, and we're like, okay. So, it's Jamie's just, I don't think he's ever not smiling.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like he's having more fun than anybody else. Like, okay.
Yeah. So even watching him live, that comes across.
Right. What it changed was sort of, instead of thinking automatically, oh, this is what we're going to do, it was, Jamie, can you do this? Sure. And then that was the only little speed bump, and then away we go with a song.
Do you have high hopes for 2021 for things getting lined back up, or are you still kind of the negative Nelly about like, it's going to be like another year?
I'm not a negative Nelly. I'm just a realist, and I'm not fucking Smash Mouth, and I don't feel like going and playing at Sturgis.
That is absurd.
Well, it's all, look, there are, I live in Orange County. If you don't, all I deal with are fucking idiots all day long. Well, tell me what to do. It's like, I don't give a fuck what you do. All I wish is that somehow or another it would only affect you and not me.
Right.
But the longer you don't wear a mask and the longer this keeps fucking going, the longer I'm not going on tour.
Right.
So every time someone goes out and does something, hey, we played for 300 people, and then someone gets infected. That's why you can't do that. It's like, but all right.
Yeah.
So what I always tell people, the science on something like this pandemic is always changing because it's new.
Right.
And so the scientists that I respect the most are the ones that start out, we don't know yet, but that's the ones I want to listen to. We don't know yet, but, right? My sister has been wearing one of those scarfy masks. And the other day, this thing comes out, it's like, wearing the scarfy mask is bad because it breaks the droplets up into even smaller parts. And I told my sister, and she's like, fuck.
Yeah.
But
same conversation with my brother, by the way.
She said, okay. And she went and got different masks.
Yeah.
But, you can't even get some people to wear a mask.
Well, but that's literally science, right? That's literally how science works.
Now it's political. Right. And, early on in, back in March, April, I had people yelling at me and saying, I'm not scared, you pussy. And I'm like, it's scared. Yeah. Nobody's scared.
Yeah.
We're not scared. We're just trying to get this thing under control. My dumb impression of this was, look, this isn't Ebola. You're not going to get this and die. But it's really contagious.
Yeah.
If 10,000 people get it at the same time in Orange County, guess what? There's only 1,000 hospital beds.
Right.
So that's kind of problematic. But nobody wanted to hear that. They just were all, you're just a pussy. And it's like, okay, all right. I don't know what to tell you. So
here we are 6 months later.
I'm not a negative Nelly about anything other than my belief that there are going to be some people that are just going to be disappointments. And because of that, that's not going to allow us to go back and do what we do. And, you know, when you talk about essential services, that's not us. When you talk about anything that's important, that's not us. We are entertainment. We're the fucking band on the Titanic. We're just playing without life jackets going, all right, well, maybe somebody will let us on a boat. Oh, I guess not. Nothing. We get nothing. We just get like, you're not important and we're going to get back to our daily lives. Okay. I'm totally down with that. I'd like to get back to my daily life too, but.
Right. But the arts are literally the last thing that'll come back. It looks like, anyway.
I mean,
at least in a traditional.
I'm okay with that. It's just that not everybody seems to want to participate in getting back to normal.
Right.
Whatever that means. Like, you know, I don't want to do that. It's like, I don't want to do this.
Right.
I don't want to do a lot of things.
Right.
I wanted to be an astronaut. I'm too tall. Guess what?
Was that a thing for real?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. When I dropped out of high school, I walked right into the Air Force and I said, want to fly the jets? How tall are you? 6'4". Nope. Fuck. And they told me, they said, you can fly the big planes and you can become a commercial pilot. And I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I should have done that.
I don't know. Getting back to something in the book, I think that one of the things that comes across, especially early in the book, you guys all have your own families now, but it's sort of how important your families were in sort of allowing the bad religion thing to germinate, even though there might have been divorces and split families and whatever, but it sounded at least like people were on board with supporting what you guys were doing, whether it was bouncing between houses or giving you money to record this one or what. It seemed like that was kind of an ongoing theme early on. And I didn't expect that, frankly, especially being punk rockers and being California and all that entails. Like, I didn't really expect that sort of buy-in. Maybe that's just the way that Jim shaded things, but that kind of came across the first few.
That is true. I mean, when you think about when the band started, my first rehearsal was in Graffin's mom's living room, and we probably played there for a month, and then we moved over to Jay Ziskraut's parents' living room, and we probably played there for 3 weeks. 2 weeks maybe. Then we moved to my garage and we played one the cops came. That was it. Right. And then we went back and did Graffin's garage. We foamed it all up and tried to make it soundproof. But everybody's parents were sort of on board with letting us do this. And, you know, my mom was remarried and my stepfather, while he wasn't a bad guy, probably trying to help me to not be a derelict. But, you know, he was saying things like, you know, you have to go to school tomorrow. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to school. I'm not going back to school. I'm going to go play a show in Orange County with the band.
Yeah.
We have a curfew at 10. I'm not going to make that. Well, you're not going to get your allowance. And I'm like, I'll make more tonight playing in Orange County than my allowance. So I'm cool with that.
Right.
So, but at the end of it, as things kept getting more real for the band and progressing and realizing that we weren't just waiting for opportunities. I think that was the one part that everyone around us has always said was, you guys were never waiting for something to happen. Mm-hmm. You made it happen. We made a demo tape like everybody else. We shopped it like everybody else. We got told to our face that we sucked and we're never going to get signed. And Brett said, cool, we're going to do it on our own. And that was the beginning of Epitaph. And that was, we never really looked back from that of, we're going to make this happen. We're not going to be one of those bands that's just like waiting for someone to discover us in Graffin's mom's garage, because that's just not going to happen. So maybe it was our work ethic that allowed people around us to realize this is worth our time and their time.
Did any of the parents get it musically or lifestyle wise? Or, I mean, I get that they were supporting.
No. In 1980, I mean, that's pretty dark. It's, you know, when your kid's a punk in 1980, you just go, oh, what have I done wrong? So yeah, well, there wasn't any attaboys then.
Did they come later though? Like, did you have people in the family that became fans of the band, like for the actual music, or they got it, or I like that song?
I don't know if I'm not going to say they ever liked the music or even the atmosphere, but I do remember parents coming to shows, certain shows like at the Whiskey,
yeah,
where they were real legitimate rock shows, and kind of being, okay, there's a lot of kids here. You guys played, they clapped, so people like you. Okay.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, they were, you know, it wasn't just you're wasting your time. We could be looked at as no longer wasting our time.
Yeah. I think there's a moment actually in the 30-year documentary or concert DVD or whatever that came out a decade ago now. Wow, that was that long ago. Jesus. Like I was born in the fall of 1979, which I realize is like exactly when the band was starting. So I've always felt like, oh, I'm Bad Religion years old.
Fair enough.
But I think there's a moment in that the DVD that came out that it might be Brett's parents actually that are like at one of the shows that was filmed for that thing, and like they're older and they say, you know, we still support it, and you can tell that they don't quite get the music, but that they get what their son's doing or something.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. You know, my dad is a Rolling Stones guy. He wasn't going to like what we did, but I think he liked what we did, not musically, but that we were sort of just rock and roll rebels. He didn't like it in the beginning because it's just like, you know, how can you?
Yeah, well, right.
It's just like, you're not like, probably like his dad didn't like the fact that, you know, he had a, you know, slick back hair and rockabilly guy.
Yeah.
Same thing. You know, you don't listen to whatever the clarinet guy was.
So, but does that change things for you as a parent once your sons get to be of age where they're finding their own music? Did you sort of go like, well, you're going to like what you're going to like, and that's
my oldest son is a Norwegian death metaler, and he was playing with Dave Hawes for a long time. He played bass for Dave.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times. He was he's a wonderful
he's
kid.
a great boy, but you wouldn't know it to know him, but he is a full-on dark metaler.
I didn't know that. I've met him a few times. I didn't know that.
My youngest son he raps up in Vancouver, and he's got a pretty decent career going on. And he and I talk about, you know, music, and I've always said to him, I go, I don't know anything about your genre. I can only help you in the broadest of senses of what we did. And, you know, in all honesty, he's 20, he'll be 20, he's 28 and 27. And we were talking not that long ago, and we just kind of got into this little disagreement. And I said, you know what? I have no business telling you how to run your business.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember in Bad Religion, no one could tell us what to do because we knew what we wanted. And same for him. And so I respect them as artists. I try to you know, be as encouraging as I can and let them know, like, you have no reason to ever stop.
Mm-hmm.
Play music until it's just no longer fun.
Mm-hmm.
Viable isn't a good word. I mean, I meet a lot of people out on the road. I used to play bass. What happened? Oh, you know, I got a job. I had a job. I had kids.
Yeah.
But really what happened was it wasn't viable. It didn't become something that you saw as successful. And I'm 100% certain that I would play in a band for free forever, because it's like bowling with your buddies on Wednesday.
Hmm.
That's my fun time.
Hmm.
Like doing the gimmies. It's just like, oh, fuck, I'm
Yeah.
doing that. That's the funnest thing I can ever possibly imagine doing. So, now I have an 8-year-old daughter, and she just started picking up a guitar, and I said, have a good time.
Yeah, I saw the pictures through Instagram, and I have a 12-year-old daughter. She was probably 8 when we bought her a little whatever it is, a little 3/4 scale guitar, and she hasn't. I was hoping she'd take to it, but then I can't live vicariously through that either.
No, and
If she wants to pick it up, she will.
you just don't ever know what someone is going to gravitate toward. I mean, my story about playing guitar, no one in my family plays an instrument.
Mm.
And I mean, extended,
Yeah,
nobody.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm probably mistaken at the hospital. Total switch out. But
So was that a right place, right time thing, you think?
my story, honestly, I was 8 years old, and I was walking through Kmart with my mom, and there was a little nylon string crappy guitar, and I said, I want that. And my mom's like, no. And I'm like, no, you have to get that for me. And
Yeah.
we're in total budget. And my mom's like, I'm not buying you a guitar. I'm like, no, I have to have that.
Yeah.
And my mom, being my mom, bought it. And I went home and learned Smoke on the Water.
Did you even know how to tune a guitar at that point?
I had no idea. But I knew that if I put my finger down on the metal thing, it sounded different.
Yeah.
And what didn't take me long to start figuring out how songs went, what sounds were, and I was fascinated by it. I couldn't stop listening to it.
It's one of my favorite Mike Watt stories. Him and D Boon, when they first got guitars, and one of them got a bass and one got a guitar, they didn't know there was a difference, and they didn't know that tuning was a thing. They just thought some people liked their strings looser and some people liked their strings tighter, and that some guitars had 4 strings and some had 6. And that's how they started as a band together, as the Minutemen, or before the Minutemen. But
I can tell you that when I was 16 years old in Bad Religion, my first bass was from Sears.
Yeah.
It was a 3/4 size bass, but I didn't know it had 4 strings, and that meant I was Gene Simmons. And I didn't like the look of this Sunburst thing, so I painted it flat black. The strings, the pickups, the tuning knobs, everything was
that's so bad.
Oh, it sounded terrible, but I was like, it looks cool, and that was all that mattered. Okay, cool enough.
There's a story in the book about it. I don't want to spoil all the stories in the book for people because they should read it, but there's a story about what eventually happens to that bass, I think, right?
Yeah, I miss it to this day.
It's now that it's 7 o'clock, we're at an hour. I don't want to take up too much of your afternoon. I appreciate the hell out of
I'm sure
having this conversation with me. It's been a long time coming.
Anytime I'm there. I'm not going anywhere.
I was texting a mutual acquaintance of ours, Scott Shiflett, earlier today, and I said, I'm talking to Jay Bentley, and I have never talked to him before. He said, how is that possible? Because you've been in the same place together. Because anytime he's in the Gimmies and they come around, then we'll hang out on the bus or whatever. I said, yeah, you know what? There was a time when Jay was on the bus, but there were cannolis involved, because I think Spike's wife, there's a place here in Boston that
I remember the cannolis.
Yeah, and we kind of got into a little spat, her and I, about which place has the better cannolis here. But there were cannolis involved, so that was more important. I was like, I'm not going to.
Way more important. Way more important.
Right.
Thanks. I thought that we'd met on the last Bad Religion in, what was we played that offbeat festival
in Providence. We may have in Providence.
That's why I thought we met there.
I met Baker there too, just sort of happenstance, and we were wearing the same sneakers. And I said,
I remember that. That's why I remember meeting you.
Yeah. Okay.
Because obviously I know who you are, and I know
right.
what you do, so it was like, cool. Now I know who that guy is.
Yeah, that's. Hopefully the site actually gets up and running again someday. That's for another time. But at least we can do things like this, and I can put them on YouTube and keep things going this way. So
yeah. We all are doing the best we can.
I in hindsight, I've had 5 months. I could have figured out what WordPress is and how to recode it better, but Who knew?
Yeah.
That seems like a lot of work.
About
Right?
all the things we could have done in the last 5 months that we just didn't because it was like, oh man, I got to go to the store.
Yeah. It's like I have a real job. I have devoted my time to that and doing this. So thanks again. This is a pleasure. I'll post it up on YouTube and then send the link out and
Perfect.
give it back to Christina. And everybody
right.
should read the book. My Kindle timed out, so I can't show it to you anymore. It just looks like a black screen, but
It looks like this.
it's really good. People should buy it.
Wait, is that backwards? Is that backwards for you too?
No, it's fine. It looks fine to
Okay,
me.
it shows backwards on my screen, so I'm like, oh, cool.
Oh, it's a mirroring thing. Yeah, no, it looks fine. The way that I have it set up, people can see it. It's fine.
Okay, good. I'm like, wait, I have a backwards copy?
That would be the most punk rock thing ever. That would be a no effects book thing. Just print it backwards.
Yeah, it's cool. You'll figure it out.
Thank you, Jay. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me make sure this saves correctly.
Okay, don't do it. We'll have to do it again.
One time I didn't. I know, right?